The Arizona sun had not yet cleared the eastern ridgeline when death came to the Mercer Ranch. It arrived on horseback, 4 riders moving through the pre-dawn gray, like shadows given flesh and purpose. The desert held its breath. Even the coyotes had gone silent. Lily Mercer was 9 years old, and she would remember every sound. She was underneath the wagon when the first shot cracked the morning silence. Her father had put her there 30 seconds earlier, his hands shaking as he pressed her small shoulders down into the dust. His voice had been steady, despite those trembling fingers. "Stay here. No matter what you hear, stay hidden. Promise me." She had promised. Now she lay in the narrow space between earth and wagon bed, her cheek pressed against dirt that still held the coolness of night. Through the gaps in the wooden planks above her, she could see fragments of the world coming apart. Boots, shadows, the hem of a green dress catching the first rays of sunlight. The boots walked past, men's voices low and urgent. Then a woman's voice, cultured and cold as river ice. "You had a choice, Joseph. You chose wrong. That was her father's name. Joseph." Lily's hands found the wooden cross hanging from her neck, the one her mother had given her last Christmas. She clutched it so hard the edges cut into her palm. Her father's voice came next, hoarse with desperation. "The child. Please, she's innocent." The woman's laugh was soft, almost gentle. "There are no innocents in this, you know that." Lily wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to do anything but lie there in the dust with her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. But she had promised. Papa said stay. So she stayed. The gunshot was impossibly loud. A small sound escaped her throat before she could stop it, but the chaos swallowed it. More gunshots, shouting. Her mother's voice screaming her name, then cutting off with terrible suddenness. Through the wagon slats, Lily saw her mother's hand fall into view. The wedding ring caught the early sunlight, a brief flash of gold against the dust. The hand didn't move again. Lily bit down on her own fist to keep from making noise, tasted blood and dirt and terror. Footsteps approached the wagon, heavy boots, a man's voice rough and uncertain. Should we check underneath the woman's voice again closer now? That perfume smell drifting down through the wooden planks. Roses, sweet and cloying and wrong in this place of death. No. We need to move. I hear riders coming from the east. Distant gunfire from a different direction. The men around the wagon cursed, scrambled for their horses. Within seconds, the thunder of hooves retreating. Then silence again. The terrible, complete silence of a world that had ended while the sun was still rising. Lily stayed under the wagon. Minutes passed, maybe hours. She couldn't tell. Time had become something strange and elastic, stretching and compressing in ways that made no sense. The sun climbed higher. The blood in the dust began to dry. Flies arrived there buzzing loud in the stillness. She stayed because Papa had told her to stay. At some point, she started humming. An old lullaby her mother used to sing. The sound helped fill the silence, helped keep the screaming locked inside her chest where it belonged. Her fingers found small pebbles in the dust, and she began arranging them in patterns. Anything to keep her hands busy. Anything to keep from thinking about the hand with the wedding ring that had stopped moving. The sun was high overhead when she heard the horse. Just one, this time. Moving slowly, cautiously. The rider dismounted. Footsteps careful and measured. A man's voice speaking low to himself. Dear God. More footsteps. The sound of fabric being moved. Lily heard him covering the bodies. She knew without seeing. Knew he was putting blankets over the people she loved, the people who would never move again. The kindness of it made something crack in her chest. She kept humming, kept arranging her pebbles, kept existing in the small space under the wagon because the world outside that space was too big and too terrible to face. The footsteps came closer, stopped. A long pause, then very gently. Hey there, little miss. I'm Caleb. I'm here to help. Lily didn't look up, didn't stop humming. Her pebbles were forming a pattern now, though she couldn't have said what pattern or why. The man called Caleb didn't come closer, didn't try to pull her out. His voice, when he spoke again, was rough with something that might have been grief or might have been old anger or might have been both. Can you come out? It's safe now. Lily's hands stilled on the pebbles. Safe. The word felt like a lie, like something that had stopped being true the moment those riders appeared on the horizon. But she looked up anyway finally, because the voice didn't sound like it belonged to the men who had done this. The man kneeling beside the wagon was older than her father had been, maybe 40, maybe more. His face was weathered like old leather creased by sun and wind and harder things, but his eyes were kind, sad but kind. They said they'd come. They'd come back, Lily heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. They said no witnesses. The man's jaw tightened. Who said that? The lady with the roses. Caleb Rourke had been riding alone for 6 days when he stumbled onto the massacre. He had been tracking stolen horses, following cold trails through country that could kill a man in a dozen different ways. He was tired and low on supplies and wanted nothing more than to finish this job and find a saloon that served decent whiskey. Finding dead families was not part of the plan. He had seen death before, too much of it. The war had shown him what men could do to each other when they stopped seeing each other as human. His years as a U.S. Marshal had shown him that the war never really ended, just moved west and changed its uniform. But this, 6 people executed with the cold efficiency of a business transaction, and a child somehow alive sitting under a wagon and arranging pebbles while the world burned around her. Caleb's daughter had been 7 when she died. Fever had taken her in 3 days, burning her up from the inside, while Caleb was 200 miles away, chasing an outlaw who wasn't worth the bullet it took to bring him down. He had arrived home to find his wife red-eyed and silent, and a small coffin that seemed impossibly light when he helped carry it to the churchyard. Anna. Her name had been Anna. She used to draw pictures of horses and flowers and the family she wanted to have when she grew up. Caleb still had those drawings wrapped in oilcloth and buried at the bottom of his saddlebag where he wouldn't have to look at them every day. He looked at the girl under the wagon and saw Anna's ghost looking back at him. Stop it, he told himself. This isn't her. This is someone else's daughter, someone else's grief. But his hands were gentle when he finally coaxed Lily out from under the wagon. She was filthy, dehydrated, shaking despite the heat. He wrapped her in his coat, gave her water from his canteen, and tried not to notice how much smaller she felt than she should have. "What's your name, Lily?" "Lily Mercer." "Lily." He nodded. "That's a good, strong name. I'm going to help you, Lily. I promise." She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much, that had aged a lifetime in a single morning. Promises, those eyes said, don't mean much anymore. Fair enough, Caleb thought. He examined her carefully. No injuries that he could see, though there were bruises on her arms where someone had grabbed her, probably her father pushing her under the wagon. No blood except what she had crawled through. The damage was all inside in places that wouldn't show for years. "Can you tell me what happened?" Lily's voice was flat, reciting facts to avoid feeling them. "They came at sunrise. 4 horses, maybe 5. I couldn't count. Papa made me hide before I saw them all." Caleb waited. Silence was a tool he had learned to use well. The Lady Lily continued after a moment. She wore a green dress, and she smelled like roses. She talked to Papa, said he was protecting the wrong people. Papa said he was protecting his family. She said no, he was protecting a lie, a woman, leading a massacre. Caleb filed that away along with the green dress and the roses, details that might matter later. "Do you know what lie she meant?" Lily shook her head. "But Papa worked at the land office. In Prescott, he saw bad things happening. He tried to tell people. Nobody would listen. The land office. Corruption in territorial land deals was as common as dirt and twice as dirty. But most disputes ended in court, not with 6 bodies cooling in the desert sun. Caleb stood surveying the scene with a lawman's eye. The bodies had been killed execution-style close range, no hesitation. Whoever did this had done it before. The wagons had been searched thoroughly before being set alight, though the fire hadn't caught properly. They were looking for something specific. He walked the perimeter, reading the ground. 4 horses, just like Lily said, all shod, all well fed from the depth of their tracks. They had come from the south left heading west, But there was something else. A fifth set of tracks arriving after the others had left. Single rider moving slowly. This person had approached the bodies dismounted, spent time here. Caleb followed the tracks to the nearest body and found what he expected. Someone had covered the victims with blankets salvaged from the burned wagons, had arranged them with dignity, placed a Bible on Joseph Mercer's chest. Caleb picked up the Bible. It was open to a specific passage marked with a piece of torn cloth. Ezekiel 22:30. I looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land. Someone had respected Joseph Mercer enough to give him burial rights, someone who knew what he had been trying to do. Lily appeared at his elbow, moving silent as a ghost. She read the passage without being asked. Papa used to read this. He said it was about standing up when no one else will. Caleb studied the girl, 9 years old and already reading scripture, understanding metaphor, processing trauma with an intelligence that made his chest ache. Your father was a brave man. Lily didn't answer. Her eyes had gone distant again, retreating to that place inside herself where the hurt couldn't quite reach. Caleb made his decision. The smart thing would be to take her to Prescott, turn her over to the sheriff, wash his hands of the whole mess. But smart didn't always mean right, and Caleb had spent 4 years learning the difference. He needed to know who the mysterious fifth rider was, needed to understand what Joseph Mercer had been protecting, and needed to keep this small, fierce girl alive long enough to get answers. Lily, he said quietly, did your father have friends? People he trusted. Lily thought about this. Uncle Isaiah, Mama's brother, but they had a fight. Years ago, we never saw him. What was the fight about? Lily shrugged a small gesture that looked too old on her young shoulders. Mama said Uncle Isaiah wanted her to stop fighting, said justice wasn't worth dying for. Mama said some things were. Caleb felt ice settle in his gut. What kind of justice, I don't know. Mama never told me the whole story, just that someone hurt Grandpa, and that person never paid for it. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture that Caleb didn't like. A woman seeking justice for her father, a husband working at the land office gathering evidence. And now both of them dead killed by professionals who left no witnesses. Except they had left a witness. They just didn't know it yet. We can't go to Prescott, Caleb said. Not yet. Lily's head snapped up. Why not? Because you said the lady mentioned a sheriff. That means law enforcement might be involved. We can't trust the normal channels. So where do we go? Caleb thought about Uncle Isaiah, a name with no face, no location. But Lily had said he was her mother's brother, and Margaret Mercer had mentioned him with respect despite their falling out. That suggested military or law enforcement, someone who valued duty even when it cost him family. Long shot. But Caleb had won on longer shots. How much do you remember about your uncle? Not much. Mama kept a picture. I think it got burned. Her voice wavered on the last word. Any idea where he might be? Lily closed her eyes, thinking. Mama said once that Isaiah chose the army over family, that he went west to forget the army. That narrowed it down. There were only so many forts in Arizona territory, and if Margaret had mentioned him choosing the army, chances were good he was still serving. Caleb pulled out his map, studied the territory. The nearest fort was Denison, about 60 miles north. It was federal jurisdiction, which meant harder to corrupt. And if Isaiah Brennan was stationed there, they might have found sanctuary. Might being the operative word. Can you ride? Lily nodded. Papa taught me. Then we ride. Caleb folded the map. We'll head to Fort Denison. It's federal territory, safer than the towns. What about Mama and Papa? Caleb looked at the covered bodies at the Bible still resting on Joseph's chest. Someone had already given them what dignity could be offered in this harsh country. Taking the time for a proper burial would cost hours they might not have. I'll mark the location. When this is over, we'll come back. Give them a proper resting place. Lily's face was unreadable. When this is over. You think it will be over, I think it has to be. Eventually. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway, accepting his words if not believing them. They rode north as the sun angled toward afternoon. Caleb kept them off the main trails using old martial tricks to mask their passage. Lily rode behind him, her small arms wrapped around his waist, silent as a ghost. The land was unforgiving. Red rock and scrub brush, occasional stands of juniper offering brief shade. Heat rose in shimmering waves, turning the horizon into liquid mirage. Caleb's horse, a sturdy black gelding named Soot, plodded onward with the patience of an animal who knew that speed in this country was how you died. They saw the riders just before sunset, two of them sitting their horses on a distant ridgeline, not approaching, just watching. Caleb couldn't make out details at this distance, but he didn't need to. The message was clear. "We know where you are." Lily's arms tightened around his waist. "Are those the people, maybe?" Caleb kept his voice calm. "Could just be drifters. They're following us. Perceptive kid." "Yeah, they are. What do we do?" "We keep moving. They want to watch. Let them watch. Long as they stay at a distance, we're okay. And if they don't stay at a distance, then we deal with it." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "You promise not to leave me." The question hit harder than it should have. Caleb thought about Anna, about the promise he had broken without meaning to. Thought about the weight of words spoken to children who believed them absolutely. "I promise." This time, he meant to keep it. They made camp in a narrow canyon sheltered from view. Caleb didn't risk a fire. They ate cold jerky and hardtack drank water that tasted of iron and dust. The stars emerged one by one, impossibly bright against the black sky. Lily sat with her back against a boulder, still clutching that wooden cross. In the starlight, her face looked carved from stone. "What happened to your daughter?" Caleb's hands stilled on the saddle he was checking. "How did you know I had a daughter?" "You look at me the way Papa looked at me, sad and scared." Caleb let out a long breath. Perceptive didn't begin to cover it. "Her name was Anna. The fever took her while I was away on duty. Do I remind you of her? No." He was honest because she deserved honesty. She was nothing like you. She was soft where you're hard. Scared of thunderstorms. Cried when I had to leave for work. Lily absorbed this. "Then where were you when she died?" "Chasing a man who robbed a stage. Brought him in 2 days after I got the telegram saying she was sick. By the time I got home, she was already buried. The silence stretched between them, filled with things that couldn't be said. Do you wish you'd stayed home every day?" Lily nodded like this confirmed something she already knew. "You're here now. That's what matters." Caleb looked at her across the darkness. This child who had lost everything, offering him absolution for sins she couldn't possibly understand. The kindness of it made his throat tight. "Yeah, I'm here now." They reached Fort Denison 3 days later. The journey had been tense, but uneventful. The watching riders had kept their distance, neither approaching nor leaving. Caleb didn't know if that was good or bad. He just knew it meant someone was very interested in where they were going. The fort sat on a low-rise adobe walls, glowing golden in the morning sun. The American flag snapped in the wind. Soldiers drilled in the yard, their movements precise and practiced. It looked like order, like civilization in a country that had precious little of either. Caleb approached the gate with Lily still riding behind him. The sentries watched their approach with the bored alertness of men who had stood this post 1,000 times. "State your business." Caleb kept his hands visible, his voice steady. "Marshal Caleb Rourke, retired. I need to speak to the commanding officer. Federal business." The sergeant squinted at him. "You got papers." Caleb produced his old badge, tarnished but still bearing the federal seal. The sergeant examined it, then looked at Lily with sharper interest. "What's the nature of this federal business massacre?" 6 dead, 1 child witness. I need to speak to Captain Brennan." The sergeant's expression shifted. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, concern. He conferred quietly with another soldier, then turned back. "Wait here." They waited in the dusty yard while runners were sent. Soldiers passed, casting curious glances at the trail-worn man and the small girl who sat too still to be natural. Caleb counted exits, mapped sightlines, cataloged potential threats. Old habits. Lily was silent beside him, her hand still clutching that wooden cross. The captain who emerged from the headquarters building was tall and lean, his uniform crisp despite the heat. He moved with military precision, but his face was pale. When his eyes found Lily, he stopped walking like he had hit a physical wall. "My God!" Caleb's hand moved instinctively toward his gun. "Captain Brennan." The captain seemed to remember where he was. Yes, I'm Isaiah Brennan. You said you had federal business. Caleb dismounted, helped Lily down. The Mercer family. Massacred 4 days ago. This is Lily Mercer, the only survivor. Isaiah Brennan's face had gone from pale to white. He stared at Lily like she was a ghost made flesh. Lily studied him with those old eyes. "Do I know you?" Brennan knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. His voice when he spoke was rough with emotion barely contained. "You wouldn't remember me. We met once when you were very small. Who are you?" Brennan looked at Caleb, then back at Lily. Then he said the words that changed everything. "My name is Isaiah Brennan. Margaret Brennan was my sister. Child, you're my niece." The world seemed to hold its breath. Lily's face showed nothing. No surprise, no joy, no fear, just that terrible calm that came from a soul that had already absorbed too much shock to process more. "Mama never told me I had an uncle." The pain that crossed Brennan's face was sharp enough to draw blood. "I know. We had a disagreement. Years ago. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was wrong." Caleb watched this reunion with growing unease. Coincidence didn't sit right with him. A chance encounter was one thing, but stumbling onto the one fort in the territory commanded by Lily's estranged uncle, that felt orchestrated. "Captain, we need to talk, privately." Brennan stood, his command voice returning. "Of course. Sergeant, see that Miss Mercer is taken to the officer's family quarters. Get her food, water, clean clothes. Treat her as my guest." The sergeant saluted. "Yes, sir." Lily looked at Caleb, uncertainty finally showing on her face. "You'll be close. I'm not going anywhere." Caleb knelt beside her, met her eyes. "You're safe here, I promise. You promised not to leave me. I'm not leaving. I'm just talking to your uncle. You can see me from the window, okay?" Lily considered this. Then, finally, she nodded. The sergeant led her away, her small figure disappearing into the fort's interior. Brennan watched her go, something breaking in his expression. Then he turned to Caleb. "My office. Now." Isaiah Brennan's office was spartanly furnished. A desk, 2 chairs, a map of the territory on one wall. The only personal touch was a photograph in a frame. 3 people younger. A man, a woman, and another man in civilian clothes. Caleb recognized the woman immediately. Margaret Mercer before she was Mercer. Younger, smiling. Standing beside her was a young man in an army uniform, Isaiah, and the third figure older with kind eyes and a merchant's clothes. Your father Brennan followed his gaze. Andrew Brennan. Yes. Dead 5 years now. Caleb waited. Brennan poured 2 whiskeys from a bottle in his desk, handed one to Caleb. Then he sat heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 45 years. "You want to know why Margaret and I weren't speaking. I want to know if you had anything to do with her death." Brennan's head snapped up, anger flashing. Then just as quickly it died. He took a long drink. "Fair question. The answer is no, but I might as well have." He stood, walked to the window. Looked out at the parade ground where soldiers drilled in the afternoon heat. Our father was a merchant in St. Louis. Honest man. Made a good living in railroad contracts. In 1876 he discovered his business partner was embezzling. Tens of thousands of dollars. Let me guess. He tried to expose him. Tried. Failed. The partner had connections. Fabricated evidence showing my father was the thief. Andrew Brennan was ruined. Lost everything. Died of heart failure 6 months later. We always knew it was heartbreak. Caleb sipped his whiskey. And the partner, Lawrence Gaines. Brennan's voice was flat. He took the money and ran west. By the time we could prove anything, he had disappeared into Arizona territory. Got himself appointed to the Territorial Land Office. Built a whole new empire on stolen money and forged documents. Margaret wanted revenge. Margaret wanted justice. Brennan turned from the window. She followed Gaines out here. Married Joseph Mercer because he worked at the land office. Spent years gathering evidence. And I told her to stop. Why? Because our father was already dead. Because chasing Gaines wouldn't bring him back. Because I thought the law would fail us again and she would get herself killed for nothing. Brennan's jaw worked. I chose to let it go, to move on, and I called her a fool for not doing the same. When was the last time you spoke to her 5 years ago? The same argument over and over. Finally, she told me if I wouldn't help her, I should stay away. So I did. Brennan's hands clenched, and now she's dead. and I wasn't there." The grief in his voice was genuine. Caleb had heard enough false grief to know the difference. "Tell me about Lawrence Gaines." Brennan returned to his desk, pulled out a folder. Lawrence Gaines, 62 years old, Territorial Land Office Director, oversees all mining and property claims for 3 counties, known for being thorough and fair in public. In private runs, one of the most corrupt operations in the territory. Proof: nothing that would stand up in court. Rumors, whispers, a few brave souls who filed complaints and mysteriously withdrew them. Brennan spread papers across the desk. "Margaret sent me these, last month. Evidence she had gathered, forged claims, bribes shell companies. It's all here." "Then why didn't she file charges?" "She tried." "The federal prosecutor is in Gaines's pocket. The judges are appointed by men Gaines has leverage over. She needed something bigger, something that couldn't be ignored, and she thought she found it." Brennan nodded. 3 weeks ago she sent a telegram, said she had proof, real proof. Documents that would bring down not just Gaines, but half the territorial government. She was going to take it to the newspapers back east, make it too public to bury. Caleb thought about the burned wagons, the searched belongings. They were looking for those documents, and they killed everyone to make sure they got them. Brennan's face was carved from stone. "My sister died for a stack of papers. Your sister died trying to get justice for your father." Caleb stood. "There's a difference." "Is there? What difference does it make if she's still dead?" "It makes a difference to Lily." Brennan flinched like he had been struck. Caleb pressed forward. That little girl watched her parents murdered. Hid under a wagon for 6 hours listening to her mother's blood dry in the dust. You think she gives a damn about papers? She needs to know her mother died for something, that the sacrifice meant something. And what if it didn't? What if Margaret was wrong? What if Gaines wins anyway? Then we make sure he doesn't. Brennan studied him. "You're retired. This isn't your jurisdiction. This isn't your fight. That girl made it my fight the moment she trusted me to keep her safe." They stared at each other across the desk. 2 men carrying different griefs, united by a 9-year-old girl who had lost everything. Finally, Brennan nodded. "Then we need to find those documents. If Margaret hid them, she hid them well. The question is where?" Caleb thought about the mysterious 5th rider. The person who had covered the bodies and left the Bible, someone who respected Joseph, someone who knew what he had been trying to do, someone who might know where the evidence was hidden. There's someone else involved, someone who arrived after the massacre. Covered the bodies, left a Bible. Brennan's eyes sharpened. "You saw this tracks? Fresh ones. And the Bible was open to a specific passage, like a message." "What passage, Ezekiel? About standing in the gap?" Brennan hesitated, weighing his words. Then, "That was Joseph's favorite verse. He used to quote it when people told him to stop fighting." So whoever left that Bible knew Joseph personally, knew what he believed, and might know where he hid the evidence. They looked at each other, pieces clicking into place. "The question is," Caleb said quietly, "do they want us to find it, or are they warning us away?" Before Brennan could answer, a knock at the door. The sergeant entered, saluting. "Sir, riders approaching from the south, 4 of them. They're flying a white flag." Caleb and Brennan exchanged glances. 4 riders. "Send them in," Brennan ordered, "but keep the men ready." The sergeant saluted and left. Caleb checked his revolver, a habit so ingrained he didn't think about it. Brennan did the same. They waited. The woman who entered was elegant even in riding clothes. Late 30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore a green dress, dusty from travel. And when she moved, the scent of roses moved with her. Caleb's hand moved to his gun. The woman smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Captain Brennan, thank you for seeing me. My name is Vivian Gaines. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Lily watched from the window of her quarters as the woman in the green dress entered the fort. Even from this distance, even after 4 days, she recognized the way that woman moved, confident, certain, like death, walking upright. The lady with the roses had come to the fort, and Lily understood with the terrible clarity of a child who had already learned the hardest lessons that nowhere was truly safe, that the monsters were real, and that they didn't stop hunting just because you found walls to hide behind. She clutched her wooden cross tighter and whispered a prayer her mother had taught her. In the office below, Caleb Rourke met Vivian Gaines's smile with cold eyes and a hand on his gun and understood that the real fight was just beginning. The girl in the dust had found her voice. Now she needed her justice. And Caleb Rourke, who had failed one daughter, swore to himself that he would not fail another, no matter what it cost. Vivian Gaines stood in the doorway of Captain Brennan's office like she owned not just the room, but the entire fort surrounding it. The green dress was dusty from travel, but she wore it with the kind of confidence that came from never doubting your place in the world. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, revealing a face that might have been beautiful if it weren't so cold. The scent of roses preceded her like an announcement. Caleb's hand stayed on his gun. Every instinct honed by years of hunting dangerous men told him he was looking at something worse. A woman who killed with the same casual efficiency most people used to swat flies. Captain Brennan stood slowly, his military bearing rigid. "Mrs. Gaines, this is unexpected." "Is it?" Vivian's smile was practiced perfect. "I would think my arrival is perfectly logical. You're harboring federal evidence. I've come to retrieve it." "Federal evidence," Brennan repeated. "And what evidence would that be?" Vivian's eyes flickered to Caleb, assessing him with the quick calculation of a professional. "You must be the man who found the child. Marshal Rourke." "I believe retired, of course." Caleb said nothing. Silence was often the best weapon against people who liked the sound of their own voice. Strong, silent type. How refreshing. Vivian moved further into the room, her movements deliberate. "Let me be direct, gentlemen. The Mercer massacre was a tragedy. Local bandits, most likely. Terrible what happened to that poor family." "Bandits don't execute people," Caleb said quietly. "No. And what makes you such an expert on execution methods, Mr. Rourke, 14 years as a U.S. Marshal?" "I've seen enough murder to know the difference between robbery and assassination." Vivian's smile didn't waver. Assassination. Such a dramatic word. "The Mercers had enemies, Mr. Rourke. Joseph was making wild accusations about my husband, slandering a respected public servant. Some people take offense to that sort of thing. So your husband sent someone to kill an entire family over slander? I didn't say that." Vivian examined her gloves, brushing away imaginary dust. "I'm simply providing context. Joseph Mercer was unstable. His wife filled his head with conspiracy theories about my husband. It's tragic that their delusions led to violence." Brennan's voice was ice. "Margaret wasn't delusional. She was my sister." Vivian's expression shifted, showing what might have been genuine surprise. "Your sister? How unfortunate. Then you know better than anyone how obsessed she became, chasing shadows, seeing corruption where there was only honest business." "The evidence says otherwise." "What evidence?" Vivian's tone sharpened. "Joseph Mercer's wild claims. Papers anyone could have forged. Captain Brennan, surely a man of your intelligence, understands that grief can make people see patterns where none exist. The evidence my sister gathered over 5 years." Caleb watched Vivian's face carefully. Documented fraud, forged mining claims, bribes paid to federal officials. Vivian was very still. "If such evidence existed, which it doesn't, it would be stolen property. My husband's confidential business records taken illegally. So you admit the evidence exists." "I admit nothing." Vivian's composure cracked slightly, a flash of something dangerous behind those cold eyes. "I'm here as a courtesy gentleman to warn you that harboring stolen documents is a federal crime, and that the child Lily Mercer is a traumatized little girl who cannot be considered a reliable witness." Caleb took a step forward. His voice, when he spoke, was soft, which made it more threatening. "You came here to threaten a 9-year-old child. I came here to offer protection." Vivian's mask slipped back into place. "That poor girl has been through hell. She needs proper care, medical attention, therapy for her delusions." "She's not delusional. Isn't she a child who claims to have witnessed a crime while hiding under a wagon? Who can't identify faces but insists she knows what happened?" Vivian shook her head sadly. "The mind plays tricks, Mr. Rourke, especially traumatized young minds. No court would accept her testimony. We'll let a judge decide that." "Will you? And which judge would that be?" "Judge Morrison, who owes his appointment to my husband's recommendation. Judge Talbot, whose son works at the land office." Vivian smiled again. You're in Arizona territory, gentlemen. This isn't the civilized East. Out here, Lawrence Gaines is the law." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Brennan spoke carefully. "If you're finished threatening us on federal property, Mrs. Gaines, I suggest you leave, of course." Vivian moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, the child. Lily, is she comfortable?" "Getting proper rest?" Caleb's hand tightened on his gun. "Stay away from her. Such hostility. I merely want to ensure her well-being." Vivian's eyes were flat empty of anything resembling human warmth. "Children are so fragile. Accidents happen, even on military bases." "Get out," Brennan said. Vivian nodded graciously. "Gentlemen, do think about what I've said. The offer of protection stands. For now." She left the scent of roses lingering like a threat. Caleb waited until her footsteps faded before speaking. "She knows we don't have the evidence." Brennan nodded grimly, "which means she's still looking for it. And she'll kill anyone who gets in her way, including Lily, especially Lily. The child is the only witness who can place Vivian at the scene. As long as she's alive, Vivian has a loose end." Caleb moved to the window, watched Vivian mount her horse in the courtyard below. 3 men waited for her, all armed, all watching the fort with the patient attention of predators. "We need to find those documents before she does. And we need to keep Lily safe while we search." Caleb turned from the window. "There's something else." She mentioned Judge Morrison and Judge Talbot specifically, like she wanted us to know how deep this goes, showing strength. "Trying to make us think fighting back is hopeless. Is it?" Brennan's jaw set. "No, but it's going to be harder than I thought." A knock interrupted them. Brennan's wife entered, a woman in her late 30s with intelligent eyes and capable hands. She glanced between them, reading the tension immediately. Constance Brennan said, "This is Marshal Rourke. Rourke, my wife Constance." Constance Brennan nodded to Caleb, then turned to her husband. "The child is asking for Mr. Rourke. She won't eat until she sees him." Caleb felt something twist in his chest. "I'll go to her. I'll come with you," Constance said. "We should talk about her care." They left Brennan to his maps and his guilt, climbing the stairs to the family quarters. Constance walked with the confident stride of a woman who knew her own mind. "She's frightened," Constance said quietly, trying hard not to show it, but she's terrified. She saw her parents murdered. "I know. And now she's in a strange place with people she doesn't know. You're the only constant she has. I'm not her father." "No, but you're the one who found her, who brought her to safety. That means something to a child." They reached the quarters. Constance knocked softly before entering. Lily sat on a bed too big for her small frame, still clutching that wooden cross. She had been cleaned up, given fresh clothes, but her eyes held the same haunted distance. When she saw Caleb, relief flooded her face. "You came. I promised I would." Caleb pulled a chair close to the bed. "How are you doing?" Lily considered the question with that unnerving seriousness. "The lady with the roses was here." "I know. You saw her from the window." Lily's fingers worked the cross. She walked like she owned everything, like no one could touch her. Constance sat on the other side of the bed. "Did you recognize her voice?" Lily nodded slowly. "She's the one who said there are no innocents, the one who gave the order." Caleb and Constance exchanged glances. Caleb said carefully, "I need you to think very hard. Can you remember anything else about that morning?" "Any other details?" Lily closed her eyes. Caleb watched her face, saw her retreating into memory. It was a long moment before she spoke. "There were 5 horses, not 4. I said 4 because I only counted 4 before Papa made me hide, but I heard 5. 5 riders, one more than Vivian had brought to the fort. The 5th one," Lily continued, eyes still closed, "came later, after the shooting stopped. I heard the horse, different sound, heavier. And the rider, they walked different, slower, like they were looking at everything." "That was the person who covered the bodies," Caleb said. Lily opened her eyes. They put Mama's hands together, like she was praying, and they put Papa's Bible on his chest, someone who cared. Caleb filed this away. "Do you remember anything else? Any voices?" Lily frowned. "There was talking, before the shooting. The lady with the roses said you were supposed to destroy the records. Papa said I kept them as insurance, against people like you." "Records," Constance said. "The evidence Margaret gathered." Lily continued. "Papa said something else. He said, even if you kill me, the truth is already safe. Someone else knows. Someone you'll never find. Caleb's pulse quickened. Someone else has the evidence. Or knows where it's hidden. Lily looked between them. What does it mean? It means your father was smarter than Vivian thought. Caleb squeezed her hand. He made sure the truth would survive even if he didn't. But who would he trust? Constance asked. If the law is corrupt, if judges are bought, who could? Joseph turned to Brennan, appeared in the doorway. I might know. They gathered in Brennan's office again this time, with Constance present. She listened as her husband laid out what he knew. Margaret's letters mentioned a priest. Brennan spread papers across his desk. Father Domingo Salazar. Runs a small mission church about 20 miles south of the Mercer Ranch. Joseph and Margaret attended services there. A priest would make sense, Constance said, bound by confession. Couldn't be forced to testify even if threatened. And someone Joseph would trust absolutely. Caleb studied the map. 20 miles south. That's close to where the 5th Rider's tracks originated. Brennan nodded. I'm sending a patrol to the mission tomorrow. Officially, to check on the congregation's well-being. Unofficially, to talk to Father Salazar. I should go with them. You're not military. I'm the one Lily trusts. If the priest has the evidence, he'll want to know she's safe before he hands it over. Brennan considered this. Fine. But you take Sergeant Cooper and 4 men. This isn't a negotiation. Agreed. Constance spoke up. What about Vivian? She'll be watching the fort. Let her watch. Brennan's voice was hard. She threatened a child on federal property. That gives me justification to restrict her access. She won't get within 100 yards of Lily. And when you leave, Constance looked at Caleb, when you go to the mission. Then Lily stays here. Caleb met her eyes. With you. Constance nodded slowly. I was a nurse during the Apache campaigns. I know how to use a rifle. And I know how to protect people I care about. The determination in her voice reminded Caleb why he had trusted his instincts about this place. Fort Denison might be surrounded by corruption, but within these walls were people who still believed in doing right. The next 3 days fell into a rhythm. Caleb spent his mornings with Lily teaching her things his daughter Anna had never lived long enough to learn. How to read weather patterns in clouds. How to tell direction by the sun. How to move quietly through a room. Lily absorbed it all with that unnerving focus. She rarely smiled, rarely showed emotion beyond that watchful calm. But sometimes, when Caleb praised her for learning something quickly, he would see a flash of pride. A glimpse of the child she might have been if the world hadn't stolen her childhood. The afternoons he spent with Brennan going through Margaret's documents, mapping connections, building a case that might actually hold up in a courtroom, if they could find an honest court. The evenings belonged to quiet conversations with Constance, who had taken to Lily with the fierce protectiveness of a woman who had wanted children and never had them. It was on the 3rd evening that Constance told Caleb the truth. They sat on the fort wall watching the sun paint the desert in shades of amber and red. Below, soldiers drilled while the flag snapped in the evening wind. I can't have children, Constance said without preamble. 3 pregnancies, all lost before the 4th month. I'm sorry, don't be. It's old grief now. Constance watched Lily playing chess with one of the younger soldiers in the courtyard below. But when I see that child, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope, purpose. Constance smiled slightly. Isaiah feels it too, though he'd never admit it. The guilt of failing Margaret is eating him alive. Protecting Lily, that's his chance at redemption. What if we can't protect her? Caleb voiced the fear that woke him at 3 a.m. What if Vivian is right, and the system is too corrupt? Then we burn the system down. Constance's voice was mild, but her eyes were steel. My father was a Union officer, fought at Shiloh. He taught me that some battles you fight because losing is worse than dying. You sound like Margaret. I wish I'd known her. From everything Isaiah's told me, she was remarkable. She was also dead, killed for fighting a battle she couldn't win. Constance turned to face him, but she damaged them, made them desperate enough to show their hand. Vivian coming here making threats in broad daylight, that's not strength. That's fear. Fear of what? Of you, of that little girl who won't stop remembering, of the truth that Margaret spent 5 years documenting. Constance pointed at Lily below. That child is 9 years old and she's already braver than most men I've known. You think she'll give up because someone threatens her? I think she shouldn't have to fight this battle. No, she shouldn't, but she is. And the question isn't whether we can protect her from everything. It's whether we can give her the tools to protect herself. They watched in comfortable silence as Lily captured her opponent's knight with economical precision. The soldier laughed, conceding the game. Lily's face showed the faintest hint of satisfaction. "You're right," he said finally. "She's not Anna. She's stronger than Anna ever got the chance to be. Then stop trying to shelter her like Anna. Start preparing her like the fighter she's becoming." The words hit harder than they should have. Caleb realized he had been trying to preserve something in Lily that was already gone. Innocence died under that wagon. What remained was something harder, sharper, more dangerous, something that might actually survive. On the fourth morning, Caleb rode out with Sergeant Cooper and 4 soldiers. They left before dawn, Caleb having said goodbye to Lily the night before. She had been stoic about it. "Of course you have to go. You're looking for the truth. I'll be back in 3 days, maybe less." "I know." Lily had gripped his hand. "Just don't promise you'll be safe. I don't want any more broken promises." The honesty of it had gutted him. "I'll be as careful as I can be. That's good enough." Now he rode through country that grew progressively harsher, red rock giving way to volcanic black stone, sparse vegetation clinging to life in defiance of logic. Sergeant Cooper was a taciturn man in his 50s career army who followed orders without question but clearly thought this entire mission was fool's errand. Marshal Cooper said as they stopped to water the horses, "You really think a priest is going to hand over evidence to strangers?" "Not to strangers. To someone who can prove Lily is safe. And if he doesn't have it, then we've wasted 3 days. But I don't think we have." Cooper grunted. "In my experience, when civilians get mixed up in corruption investigations, they end up dead. Just saying." Joseph and Margaret knew the risks, did they? Cooper checked his rifle. "Begging your pardon, but there's knowing risks and there's understanding them. Most people think they're brave until the moment comes. Then they learn different. You think they were cowards? I think they were civilians playing soldier. Got themselves killed for it." Cooper's voice softened slightly. "The girl, though, she's got something. Saw her watching the men drill yesterday, taking notes in her head. That's a survivor. She's 9 years old. Age doesn't matter. I've seen grown men break under less. She hasn't broken. That means something." They reached the mission by mid-afternoon. It was a small adobe structure weathered by decades of sun and wind. A wooden cross marked it as a place of worship. Chickens scratched in the dusty yard. A small garden struggled against the heat. Father Domingo Salazar emerged as they dismounted. He was perhaps 60, with a lined face that spoke of hard years and harder choices. His cassock was faded but clean. His eyes were sharp. Soldiers, he greeted them. "Welcome. We don't get many visitors from the fort," Father Salazar Cooper said. "We're here on official business. This is Marshal Caleb Rourke." Salazar's expression didn't change, but Caleb saw recognition flicker. "Marshal Rourke. I've heard of you. You found the Mercer child." "I did. She's safe at Fort Denison. Is she?" Salazar gestured toward the church. "Perhaps we should speak inside." The church interior was cool, dim, peaceful. Salazar lit a candle at the altar, then turned to face them. The child saw everything Caleb said quietly. "She can identify the killers. And you want me to testify to what Joseph told me in confession?" Salazar shook his head. "I cannot. My vows forbid it. I'm not asking you to break confidence. I'm asking you to help us find evidence that Joseph and Margaret gathered." "What makes you think I have such evidence?" "Because Joseph told Vivian Gaines that the truth was already safe with someone she'd never find. Because tracks from the massacre site lead here. Because someone covered those bodies with respect and left a Bible open to Joseph's favorite verse. The priest studied him as if hearing a confession. Then, how is the child truly traumatized? Brave. Too young to be carrying what she's carrying. And you? What's your stake in this? I failed my own daughter. I won't fail someone else's." Salazar studied him with eyes that had heard a lifetime of confessions. "Guilt is a poor foundation for guardianship, Marshal. It's the foundation I have. Perhaps." Salazar moved to the altar, knelt briefly in prayer, then stood. Joseph Mercer was a good man. He came to me 6 months ago, said he had evidence that could bring down corrupt men, but feared for his family. Asked me to keep something safe. Do you have it? I do. But before I give it to you, I need to know that Lily is truly safe, that you can protect her from what comes next. Vivian Gaines is looking for this evidence. She's already threatened the fort. Then you know what you're facing. A woman who kills without hesitation, backed by a man with unlimited resources and no conscience. Salazar's voice was grave. If I give you this evidence, Lily becomes the only living witness. They will never stop hunting her. They're already hunting her. Yes, but right now they're not certain she knows anything useful. Once this evidence surfaces, they'll know, and they'll do whatever it takes to silence her. Caleb met the priest's eyes. Then we make sure they can't. We use the evidence to bring them down before they can hurt anyone else. You have that much faith in justice. I have faith in giving a 9-year-old girl the chance to grow up. Salazar nodded slowly. Come with me. He led Caleb alone to a small room behind the altar, pulled aside a loose stone in the wall, retrieved a sealed leather pouch. Joseph gave me this with specific instructions. Only to be opened if something happened to him and Margaret. Only to be given to someone who could be trusted to protect Lily. Caleb took the pouch. It was heavier than expected. What's in it? The truth. Salazar's voice was heavy. Joseph was meticulous. Every fraudulent claim, every bribe, every death that could be traced to Lawrence Gaines's corruption. It's all documented. How many deaths? 11. That we know of. Salazar crossed himself. 11 people who stood in his way. All ruled accidents or suicides. All actually murdered. And Vivian was his enforcer. Joseph had witnesses, people who saw her at scenes, who heard her make threats. It's all in there. Caleb unsealed the pouch. Inside were folders, documents, photographs, ledgers showing payments, testimonies signed and witnessed, a dossier that represented 5 years of Margaret Brennan Mercer's life. This is enough to hang them both, if you can get it to a court they don't control. If you can keep Lily alive long enough to testify, if you can survive the war they'll bring down on anyone who threatens them. Salazar's face was drawn. Joseph knew the risks, so did Margaret. But Lily didn't choose this fight. No, but she's in it anyway. Then God help you both. Salazar placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. I will pray for you, for her, for justice to prevail. Pray she lives to see it. They rode back to the fort in double time. Sergeant Cooper, sensing the urgency, even if he didn't know the details, the leather pouch was secured in Caleb's saddlebag, heavier than its physical weight. It represented not just evidence, but responsibility. Lily's life depended on what they did with this information. They were 10 miles from the fort when Cooper raised his hand. Riders, how many? 3, maybe 4, coming fast from the east. Ambush, maybe. Or maybe they're running from something. The riders resolved into focus. 3 men horses, lathered with sweat, riding like demons, were chasing them. They saw the soldiers and veered toward them. Cooper's hand went to his rifle. Hold! The lead rider was young, barely 20, with terror in his eyes. Fort Denison. Is it that way 5 miles north? Cooper's voice was sharp. What's wrong? The man's horse danced exhausted. Raiders hit the mission. Father Salazar? They killed him. Caleb felt ice flood his veins. An hour ago, maybe less. The young man's voice shook. We were working in the fields, heard shots. By the time we got there, 5 riders were leaving. Father was dead. Did you see their faces? One of them. A woman. Dark hair, green dress. She smiled when she saw us, like she wanted us to remember. Vivian. Cooper looked at Caleb. She knows you were there, and she knows Salazar gave me something. Caleb's mind raced. They'll assume I'm bringing it to the fort, which means, Cooper said grimly, they'll be waiting between us and safety. How many men does she have? Cooper considered. 4 with her at the fort, at least 5 at the mission. Could be more we haven't seen, against 6 of us. Bad odds, the sergeant said. But I've faced worse. Caleb looked at the young riders. You 3, take our spare horses, ride to Tucson, find the federal marshal's office, tell them everything you saw. They won't believe us. Make them believe. Tell them Father Salazar is dead and soldiers are riding into an ambush. That'll get their attention. The young men nodded, took the horses, and rode south. Cooper watched them go. You think they'll make it? I think Vivian has bigger prey to hunt. Us. Yeah. Cooper grinned without humor. Well then, let's not disappoint the lady. They approached the fort carefully, using every scrap of cover the land offered. The sun was setting, painting the world in shades of blood and shadow. Perfect time for an ambush. It came 2 miles from safety. The first shot took down one of Cooper's men before anyone saw the shooter. The soldier fell from his horse without a sound. The second shot went wide as they scattered. Caleb drove his horse toward a cluster of rocks. Cooper and the remaining soldiers followed. They formed a defensive position, rifles ready. How many, Cooper asked. At least 4. Caleb had caught a glimpse of muzzle flash. Well positioned. They've got the high ground, so we wait them out. They know we have what they want. They'll come eventually, or they'll wait until we make a mistake. The standoff stretched. Minutes became an hour. The sun touched the horizon. Darkness would bring advantages to both sides. Then a voice called from the rocks above. "Marshal Rourke, let's talk." Vivian Gaines emerged from cover confident, despite being in rifle range. She stood on a boulder silhouetted against the dying light. Caleb stayed behind cover. "Nothing to talk about. I disagree. You have something that belongs to me. I want it back. It never belonged to you. Semantics." Vivian smiled. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me that pouch. In exchange, I'll let you and these soldiers ride to the fort. No one else needs to die." "And Lily?" "The child is traumatized, needs professional care. I'll see that she gets it." "Professional care meaning a shallow grave. You wound me, Marshal. I have no quarrel with a 9-year-old girl. My concern is simply that stolen documents be returned to their rightful owner. Your husband forged those documents. Prove it in a court, with judges and lawyers." "Go ahead." Vivian's voice was mocking. "Or you can accept reality. Lawrence Gaines owns this territory. You can fight him and die, or you can walk away and live." I've heard that speech before. From every corrupt official who thought power made them untouchable. And how many of them are still standing? Fewer than you'd think. Vivian's smile faded. "Last chance, Marshal. The documents. Now." Caleb's answer was to raise his rifle. The reaction was immediate. Gunfire from multiple positions. Caleb and the soldiers returned fire disciplined and accurate. One of Vivian's men went down. Another ducked behind cover wounded, but they were still outnumbered. Cooper swore as a bullet grazed his arm. "We can't hold this position." "Don't have to." Caleb pointed toward the fort. "They can see the gunfire. Help is coming, if it arrives in time. Then we make our own time." Caleb pulled out the leather pouch, held it up where Vivian could see. "You want this? Come get it." He threw it. Not toward Vivian, but toward open ground between their positions. The effect was electric. Vivian's men broke cover scrambling for the pouch. It gave Cooper and his soldiers clean shots. 2 more of Vivian's men went down, but in the chaos, Vivian herself reached the pouch, snatched it up and retreated to cover. Caleb watched her go, satisfaction cold in his chest. Cooper stared at him. "You just gave her the evidence." "No, I gave her a decoy." What Caleb patted his jacket. "The real evidence is here. What I threw was blank paper in a similar pouch." Cooper started laughing, despite the bullets. "You sneaky bastard. Learned from chasing sneakier bastards." The gunfire slackened. Vivian's remaining men were retreating, covering her withdrawal. In the distance, Caleb could see riders coming from the fort. Brennan had seen the fight. Vivian appeared one last time, holding the pouch. Her face, even at this distance, was twisted with fury. When she opened it and saw blank paper, her scream echoed across the desert. "This isn't over, Rourke. Never thought it was." She rode away into gathering darkness, her surviving men following. Caleb watched her go, knowing this was only the beginning. Brennan arrived with 20 soldiers. His face was grim as he surveyed the casualties. 1 dead, 3 wounded, including Cooper. What happened? Ambush. Vivian wanted the evidence. Caleb handed the real pouch to Brennan. "I didn't give it to her." Brennan opened the pouch, scanned the contents. His face went pale. "My God, this is everything. Everything Joseph and Margaret died to protect. We need to get this to someone who can use it, someone Gaines doesn't own." Brennan nodded slowly. "I know someone. Federal prosecutor in Santa Fe. He's clean. And he hates corruption cases. How long to get there?" 3 days hard riding. Then we need to move fast. before Vivian regroups. They returned to the fort in tight formation, alert for further attacks. None came. Vivian was licking her wounds, planning her next move. Lily was waiting when they entered the gate. She took one look at Caleb's face and knew something had changed. "You found it. We found it, and it's enough." Lily's face showed the first real hope Caleb had seen, enough to stop them, enough to try. They gathered in Brennan's quarters, Caleb Brennan, Constance, and Lily. The documents spread across the table like evidence at trial. Lily studied them with that unsettling focus. She couldn't read all the legal language, but she understood enough. These are the people Mama was fighting. Yes, and now we have proof. We have proof. The question is what to do with it. "We take it to court," Lily said, like Mama wanted. Brennan shook his head. "Every court in Arizona is compromised. Then we go somewhere else." Lily's voice was firm. "We go to Santa Fe, to this clean prosecutor you mentioned. That's 3 days through dangerous territory," Constance said. "With Vivian hunting us, so we don't run." Lily looked at each of them. "We fight. You're 9 years old. I'm the witness. Without me, this is just papers." Lily touched the documents. "But with me, with what I saw, it's proof." Caleb felt pride war with fear. "She's right. She's a child," Brennan protested. "I'm the child they tried to kill." Lily's eyes were hard. "I'm the child who won't let Mama and Papa die for nothing. So we're doing this. The only question is whether you're brave enough to help me." The silence in the room was profound. Finally, Constance spoke. "I'll go with you." 3 heads turned to stare at her. "I'm not letting a 9-year-old girl and 2 men ride into danger without someone who has common sense." Constance's voice was matter-of-fact. "Besides, I can shoot. I can nurse wounds. And I'm expendable in ways you're not." "You're not expendable," Brennan said. "To the Army? Yes, I am." Constance smiled at her husband. "But to that child I might be exactly what she needs, a mother figure, someone who understands that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway." Lily crossed to Constance, took her hand. "Will you teach me to shoot?" Constance looked down at the small, fierce girl. "I'll teach you to survive. Then I'm ready." Caleb watched this exchange and understood that the decision had been made. Not by him, not by Brennan, by a 9-year-old girl who had already lost everything and refused to lose anything more. "We leave at first light," he said. "Small group, fast horses. We don't stop until we reach Santa Fe. I'll assign an escort," Brennan said. "My best men." "No," Caleb shook his head. 4 people are harder to track than a platoon, and we can't risk the evidence being captured with military personnel. That would make it a federal case before we want it to be. So just the 4 of us." "Just us?" Brennan looked at his wife. "Constance, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." She squeezed his hand. "Someone has to make sure these fools don't get themselves killed." That night, Caleb found Lily on the fort wall staring at the stars. He climbed up beside her, said nothing for a long moment. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified." "But you're going anyway." "Have to. You made a good argument." Lily smiled slightly. "Mama used to say the best weapon is truth. Papa said the best weapon is truth backed up by guns. They were both right. Are we going to die?" The question was direct, unflinching. Caleb respected her enough to give an honest answer. "We might. The people we're fighting are dangerous. They've killed before. They'll kill again if they get the chance, but we're going anyway." "Yes, why?" "Because," Caleb said slowly, "some things are worth dying for. Justice, truth, protecting people who can't protect themselves. Mama and Papa thought that. They did. And they were right, even if it cost them everything." For a time, Lily said nothing. Then, "I'm glad you found me. I'm glad too. Even if we die, even then." She leaned against him, small and warm and impossibly brave. Caleb put his arm around her, this child who wasn't his but might as well be. Tomorrow they would ride into danger. Tomorrow they would face killers and corruption and impossible odds. But tonight, under stars that had witnessed countless struggles and countless victories, a broken man and a traumatized child found something they both thought they'd lost forever: hope. And in the darkness beyond the fort walls, Vivian Gaines planned her vengeance, unaware that the weapon she feared most wasn't evidence or testimony. It was the unbreakable will of a 9-year-old girl who had decided that truth mattered more than safety. The girl in the dust had become the girl who would not break, and God help anyone who stood in her way. Dawn came cold to Fort Denison. Caleb Rourke stood in the stable checking saddles and supplies with the methodical care of a man who knew that small mistakes in the wilderness could mean death. 4 horses, 4 riders, 3 days of hard country between them and Santa Fe, 3 days with Vivian Gaines hunting them. Lily appeared in the stable doorway dressed in practical riding clothes that Constance had altered to fit her small frame. She looked impossibly young in the gray morning light, but her eyes held that familiar steel. "Are we ready?" "Almost." Caleb tested the cinch on her saddle one more time. "You remember what we talked about. Stay close. Don't argue with orders. If shooting starts, get to cover." Lily recited it like a lesson. "And trust you to keep me safe." "That last part is the most important, I know." Constance Brennan entered next carrying a rifle with the easy familiarity of someone who had carried one before. She wore split riding skirts and a man's shirt practical for hard travel. Her hair was pulled back severely. Everything about her said she was ready for war. "Isaiah wants to talk to you," she said to Caleb, "before we leave." Caleb found Captain Brennan in his office staring at a map of the territory. The older man looked like he had not slept. "You don't have to do this," Brennan said without preamble. "Yes, I do. You could leave the evidence with me. Let me send it through official channels. We both know that would get it buried, or lost, or conveniently destroyed." Caleb moved to the map. "This only works if we deliver it directly to someone who can't be bought. Federal Prosecutor James Whitmore in Santa Fe." Brennan tapped the city on the map. "He's the most honest man in the territory. But getting to him means surviving Vivian. She's already lost men. She's wounded desperate, which makes her more dangerous, not less." Brennan turned from the map. "Constance is the only family I have left. If something happens to her because of my sister's crusade, then you'll have lost 2 people to the same fight." Caleb met his eyes. "But if we don't go, if we don't try, then Margaret died for nothing. And Lily lives the rest of her life looking over her shoulder." Brennan's silence stretched as he weighed the decision. Finally he nodded. "I've arranged for supply caches along the route, every 50 miles. Food, water, ammunition. They're marked on this map." He handed Caleb a folded paper. Caleb studied the route. It avoided main roads stuck to rough country where a small group could move faster than a large one. 3 days if the weather holds, 2.5 if you push hard." Brennan hesitated. "There's something else. A telegram came this morning. From Tucson, those young men who fled the mission, they made it. Federal marshals are investigating Father Salazar's death. That's good news. It would be. Except the marshal assigned to the case is Robert Chen, and Chen served with Lawrence Gaines in the war. They're old friends." Caleb cursed quietly. "So even the federal investigation is compromised." "Possibly. Which means you need to get that evidence to Whitmore before Chen can interfere. Before Gaines realizes what's happening and calls in favors. How much time do we have?" "A week, maybe less. Then we better ride fast." They assembled in the courtyard as the sun cleared the eastern mountains. Sergeant Cooper was there with a dozen soldiers forming an honor guard. It was more ceremony than Caleb wanted, but Brennan had insisted. Isaiah Brennan stood before his wife, trying to find words. Finally, he just pulled her close. "Come back to me. I plan to." Constance kissed him. "But if I don't know that I chose this, that it mattered. Everything you do matters." They separated. Brennan turned to Lily, knelt to her level. "You're very brave. Your mother would be proud." Lily studied him seriously. "Are you going to be okay? When we're gone, I'll be here, waiting. And when you come back, we'll talk about family, about what it means to be an uncle who doesn't run away. I'd like that." Caleb shook Brennan's hand. "If we're not back in 10 days, assume the worst. I'll give you 12. Then I'm coming after you with the entire garrison. Fair enough?" They rode out through the fort gates as the soldiers stood at attention. Caleb led on his black gelding Soot, with Lily on a smaller bay mare. Constance rode a sturdy roan, and a pack-horse carried their supplies. They moved at a steady canter, eating up ground while the horses were still fresh. Behind them, Fort Denison grew smaller. Ahead, the wilderness waited. The first day passed without incident. They followed Brennan's map through country that grew progressively wilder. Red rock canyons gave way to pine forests which yielded to high desert scrubland. The land was beautiful in a harsh way, indifferent to human struggles. They made camp that night in a sheltered canyon, risking a small fire for hot food. Lily was exhausted, but trying not to show it. Constance noticed. "You did well today. 15 hours in the saddle is hard on anyone. I can keep up. I know you can. But there's no shame in admitting when you're tired." Lily was quiet for a moment. "If I admit I'm tired, will we stop?" "No, we keep moving, but knowing your limits helps you manage them." Lily nodded, absorbing this. She ate her beans and hardtack in silence, then curled up in her bedroll near the fire. Within minutes, she was asleep. Constance watched her with soft eyes. "She's so young. Too young for this." Caleb added wood to the fire. "But she's right. Without her testimony, the evidence is just papers. Do you think she can handle it? Testifying in court, facing them again? I think she's the strongest person I've ever met, but that doesn't mean this won't hurt her." Constance pulled out her rifle, began cleaning it with practiced efficiency. "I was 17 when I enlisted as a nurse. Apache campaigns 74 and 75. Saw things no one should see. Boys barely older than Lily shot to pieces. Men screaming for mothers who were 1,000 miles away. Why tell me this? Because I learned something in those years." Constance sighted down the barrel. "Strength isn't about not breaking. It's about what you become after you break. Lily's already broken. The question is what she'll build from the pieces. And what do you think she'll build? Something harder than what broke her." Constance set the rifle aside. "I just hope she doesn't lose herself in the process. That's why we're here. To make sure she has a choice." They took turns on watch. Caleb had first shift, sitting with his back to a boulder and his rifle across his knees. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. Somewhere out there, Vivian Gaines was planning, hunting, coming. He was ready. The second day brought their first real trouble. They were crossing a narrow valley when Caleb saw the dust. Riders perhaps 5 miles back, moving fast. Too fast to be anything but pursuit. "We've got company." Constance shaded her eyes. "How many? Can't tell yet. But they're closing. What do we do?" Lily's voice was calm, controlled. "We run." Caleb pointed toward a line of hills to the east. "There's rough country that way. We can lose them if we're smart. And if we can't, then we fight." They pushed the horses hard, racing for the broken terrain. The pursuers matched their pace, slowly closing the distance. Caleb could make out details now. 4 riders, no 5. And leading them a flash of green dress. Vivienne. She had found them faster than he'd expected, which meant she had help. Someone at the fort or someone watching the trails. It didn't matter now. What mattered was survival. They reached the hills and plunged into a maze of canyons. Caleb knew this country from his martial days, knew the hidden passes and box canyons that could trap the unwary. He led them deeper, choosing paths that would slow mounted pursuit. Behind them, the sounds of following horses echoed off stone walls. They emerged into a small valley with a creek running through it. Good defensive position, high ground on 3 sides, but also potentially a trap if they were surrounded. "We make a stand here," Caleb decided. "Constance, take Lily up that ridge. Find cover." "What about you?" "I'm going to slow them down." Caleb. Lily started. "No arguments. Remember what you promised." Lily's jaw set, but she nodded. She and Constance scrambled up the rocky slope, leading their horses. Caleb positioned himself behind a boulder with clear sightlines down the valley. He didn't have to wait long. The first rider appeared cautiously, scanning for ambush. Caleb let him pass. The second and third followed. Then Vivian herself, still in that green dress, now torn and dusty, but unmistakable. "Marshal Rourke," she called. "I know you're here. I can smell the fear." Caleb said nothing. "This is pointless, you know. You can run to Santa Fe. You can run to Mexico. It doesn't matter." Vivian dismounted, confident, despite being in an ambush position. "Lawrence Gaines owns this territory. He owns the judges, the marshals, the politicians. You're fighting a war you already lost." Caleb's finger rested on the trigger. He could end this now, One shot. But killing her wouldn't stop Gaines, wouldn't bring justice, would just make him a murderer. Still nothing. Vivian laughed. The strong, silent type. How tedious. Very well. Let's make this interesting. She smiled that cold, empty smile. Your little pet is so trusting. Believes in crosses and prayers and justice. Such a sweet child. It would be a shame if something happened to her faith or her life. Caleb's blood ran cold. Here's what's going to happen, Vivian continued. You're going to give me the real evidence this time. In exchange, I'll let the child live. You and the woman can even go free. I don't care about you. I care about protecting my husband. Your husband is a murderer. My husband is a survivor, just like me. Vivian's smile faded. You think you're righteous. You think you're the hero. You're a washed-up marshal who failed his own daughter. Now you're playing protector because you can't face your own guilt. The words hit harder than bullets. I looked into you, Marshal Rourke. Anna wasn't it, 7 years old. Died while you were off chasing outlaws for money. Some father you were. Caleb's hands tightened on the rifle. And now you've attached yourself to another little girl, trying to rewrite history, trying to save the daughter you let die. But you can't, Marshal. The past doesn't change. And this girl, she's going to die too, just like Anna, unless you're smart. Give me the evidence. Caleb stood slowly, rifle pointed down. He emerged from cover. Vivian's smile returned. Sensible? I knew you were smart. Smart enough to know you're lying. Caleb's voice was flat. You'll kill us all whether I give you the evidence or not. True, but I'll make it quick if you cooperate. That's more mercy than you deserve. The gunshot came from the ridge above. Constance Brennan had taken the shot, and it was perfect. The bullet caught Vivian in the shoulder, spinning her around. Her men reacted instantly, returning fire, but they were exposed in open ground against opponents on high terrain. Caleb added his own fire, methodical and accurate. One of Vivian's men went down. Another's horse was hit, throwing him. The remaining two grabbed Vivian and retreated in chaos, returning fire wildly. Within seconds, they were gone, leaving one dead man and an injured horse. Caleb scrambled up the ridge. Constance was reloading, her face grim. Lily stood behind her, pale but steady. Nice shot. I was aiming for her heart. Constance ejected the spent cartridge. I'm out of practice. You winged her. That'll slow her down. They gathered the horses and moved immediately. Staying in one place after a gunfight was suicide. They rode hard for 2 hours, putting distance between themselves and pursuit. Finally, as the sun began to set, they stopped to rest the horses. Lily had been silent the entire time. Now she spoke, her hand touching her throat where the cross still hung. She threatened me, like she threatened Mama. I know, but she failed then. She'll fail now. Doesn't matter now. It matters to me. It was Mama's. Caleb knelt beside her. Your Mama's memory isn't in that cross. It's in you, in your courage, in your determination to see this through. Lily's eyes were bright with unshed tears. She said terrible things about you, about Anna. I know. Were they true? Some of them. Caleb didn't look away. I was away when Anna died, and I do carry guilt for that. But Vivian was wrong about one thing. What I'm not trying to replace Anna. I'm trying to be the man she deserved as a father, the man I wasn't then. He touched Lily's shoulder. And you're not a replacement. You're yourself, someone worth protecting for who you are. Lily nodded slowly. Then, I'm glad you're here. Me too. Constance watched this exchange, her expression soft. Then we better make sure we all survive to see Santa Fe. The third day brought them into higher country. Pine forests replaced desert scrub. The air grew cooler, sweeter. They were close now. One more push, and they would reach federal territory. But Vivian wasn't finished. The attack came at midday. Not from behind where they expected, but from ahead. An ambush in a narrow canyon pass. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Caleb's horse screamed and went down, throwing him hard. He rolled, came up with rifle in hand, returning fire. Constance and Lily were pinned behind rocks, horses scattered. And walking down the canyon toward them unhurried, despite the bullets, was Vivian Gaines. Her shoulder was bandaged, her green dress soaked with blood. But she walked like death itself, a revolver in each hand. End of the line, Marshal. Caleb fired. Missed. Fired again. One of Vivian's guns spun away, but she kept coming. You're resilient, I'll give you that. Vivian's remaining gun came up, but resilience only delays the inevitable. The shot that saved Caleb's life came from an unexpected direction. A rifle cracked from high on the canyon wall. The bullet took Vivian in the leg, dropping her. Her men turned toward this new threat, confused. And then Sergeant Cooper appeared on the ridge with a dozen soldiers. Cooper's voice boomed across the canyon. "This is the United States Army. Lay down your weapons. And you'll need this." Caleb took the reins with a nod. Good timing on both counts. "We'll have you all court-martialed. This changes nothing. Lawrence will have you all court-martialed. This was an illegal operation on territorial land. This is federal pursuit of murder suspects." Cooper's voice was hard. "And you just got caught red-handed. You have no proof. We have enough, including the testimony of 3 civilian witnesses who saw you murder Father Salazar." Vivian's laughter died. Her face went cold, calculating. Then, "I want to make a deal." "No deals," Caleb said. Vivian looked at him. "You want Lawrence, I'll give him to you. Everything, every crime, every bribe, every murder. I'll testify against him in exchange for immunity. Why would we deal with you?" "Because I can give you the entire network, not just Lawrence. Every judge, every official, every businessman in his pocket." Vivian's voice was urgent. "I can dismantle the whole corrupt system. Isn't that what you want? What I want is justice for the people you killed. Justice is a fairy tale." Vivian struggled to her feet despite her wounds. "The only thing that matters is power. And I'm offering you the power to bring down everyone. All you have to do is let me walk away." Caleb looked at Lily. The girl stood with Constance's arm around her, watching Vivian with those old eyes. "What do you think?" Caleb asked her. Lily considered this, her face thoughtful. Then, "Mama wouldn't make that deal. Papa wouldn't either. They believed some things were wrong no matter what you could gain from them. Even if it means we might not get everyone, even then." Caleb turned back to Vivian. "You heard the lady. She's a child. She's the person you tried to kill, and she just decided your fate." Caleb nodded to Cooper. "Take her into custody. Federal charges. Murder of a priest. Attempted murder of federal witnesses. Conspiracy. Everything you can stack." Vivian's face twisted with rage. "You're making a mistake. Lawrence will destroy you. He can try." As soldiers led Vivian away, Lily came to stand beside Caleb. "Did I do the right thing?" "You did what your parents would have wanted. That's always right, even if it's harder, especially then." They reached Santa Fe 2 days later, escorted by Cooper's soldiers. The city was larger than anything Lily had seen, buildings of adobe and wood climbing hillsides, church bells ringing the hour. Civilization after days of wilderness. Federal Prosecutor James Whitmore received them in his office, a spare room with law books lining every wall. He was perhaps 50, with gray hair and the kind of face that suggested he had seen every variation of human corruption and remained stubbornly hopeful anyway. Marshal Rourke. "I received Captain Brennan's telegram." Whitmore gestured to chairs. "Please sit." Caleb handed over the leather pouch. "Everything is documented. 5 years of evidence. Fraud, bribery, murder." Whitmore opened it carefully, scanning the contents. His expression grew progressively grimmer. "Dear God, this is worse than I imagined. Can you prosecute? I can try. But Lawrence Gaines has resources, connections in Washington. This will be the fight of my career. You'll also have Vivian Gaines in custody." Caleb leaned forward. "She's wounded, angry, and betrayed. Work on her. Get her to flip. She's already offered to testify against her husband." Whitmore's smile was thin. "Seems loyalty only extends so far when you're facing the gallows. Then you have everything you need." "Almost." Whitmore looked at Lily. "I'll need the child's testimony. In open court. Can she handle that?" Lily spoke before Caleb could. "I can handle it." Whitmore studied her. "You understand what it means? You'll have to describe what you saw. Answer questions from defense attorneys who will try to make you doubt yourself." "I know what I saw," Lily's voice was steady, "and I won't lie about it. Then we have a case." The trial began 3 weeks later. Federal court, federal judge, jury drawn from across the territory. Whitmore had worked fast, knowing that delay would give Gaines time to interfere. Lawrence Gaines sat at the defense table, flanked by expensive lawyers. He was a large man, well-dressed, with the kind of face that suggested honest dealings and firm handshakes. Looking at him, you would never suspect murder. Beside him in shackles sat Vivian. They did not look at each other. The prosecution built its case methodically, documents showing fraudulent land claims, bank records proving bribes, testimony from victims' families, each piece of evidence another nail in Gaines's coffin. On the fourth day, Vivian took the stand. She wore a simple gray prison dress, her elegance stripped away. But her voice remained cold and clear. "State your name for the record. Vivian Grace Gaines, and your relationship to the defendant. I'm his wife and his business partner." Vivian's eyes found Lawrence. "Or I was until he decided I was expendable." The courtroom stirred. Whitmore approached. "Mrs. Gaines, you've agreed to testify in exchange for consideration in sentencing. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Tell us about the Mercer family." Vivian's testimony was clinical detailed. She described how Lawrence had learned that Joseph Mercer was gathering evidence, how he had ordered the family eliminated, how Vivian had personally led the attack because Lawrence wanted it done right. "I gave them a chance," Vivian said. "I told Joseph to destroy the documents. He refused, so I did what was necessary. You killed 6 people. I protected my husband's interests," which he seems to have forgotten. The defense attorney, a smooth man named Carver, tried to discredit her. "You're a woman scorned, aren't you? Angry at your husband? I'm a woman who refuses to hang alone for crimes we committed together. You expect this court to believe you committed murder on your husband's orders? I expect this court to look at the evidence, the money trail, the forged documents, the pattern of deaths." Vivian's voice was ice. "Lawrence Gaines built an empire on theft and murder. I was his tool. But he held the knife." Lawrence Gaines's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched. On the 6th day, Lily testified. Whitmore had prepared her carefully, but nothing could really prepare a 9-year-old for this moment. She walked to the witness stand in a new dress Constance had bought her, white with blue flowers. Her red hair was braided. She looked impossibly small. "State your name, please." "Lily Mercer." "And how old are you?" "Lily, 9.5. A ripple of sympathy moved through the courtroom. Whitmore's voice was gentle. "Lily, I need to ask you about the morning your family died. Can you tell us what happened?" Lily's hands gripped the rail of the witness box. "We were at the ranch. Papa woke me up before sunrise, said I needed to hide under the wagon. He was scared. I could tell. What happened next, riders came. I heard horses, then voices. A woman's voice telling Papa he had a choice. Do you see that woman in this courtroom?" Lily's eyes moved to Vivian. "That's her, the lady who smells like roses. Let the record show the witness has identified Vivian Gaines." Whitmore paused. "What did the woman say to your father?" "She said he chose wrong. Papa begged her to spare me, said I was innocent. She said there were no innocents. Then what happened?" Lily's voice cracked slightly. "She shot him. I heard Mama scream, then more shooting. Then everything got quiet." Defense attorney Carver rose. "Objection. The witness has admitted she was hiding under a wagon. She couldn't have seen the shooting. But I heard it," Lily said before the judge could rule. "I heard everything. The shots, Mama calling for Papa, the lady with roses giving orders to burn everything." Judge Harrison leaned forward. "The witness may continue." Whitmore approached gently. "Lily, I know this is hard. Just a few more questions. Did you see the defendant, Lawrence Gaines, at any time that morning?" Lily hesitated. "No, I didn't see him." A murmur went through the courtroom. Gaines's lawyer smiled. But Lily continued, "I heard the lady say his name. She said Lawrence wants this done clean. No witnesses, no evidence." Hearsay Carver objected. "It's a statement by a CO conspirator," Whitmore countered. "Admissible under federal rules." Judge Harrison nodded. "Overruled. The witness may continue." Lily looked directly at Lawrence Gaines for the first time. He stared back, his face a mask. "Anything else you remember?" Lily's hand went to her throat, touching the place where her cross used to hang. "Mama told me once that bad men think they're untouchable, that they believe money and power make them safe. But she said truth is stronger than power, and that someday truth wins. Your mother was a wise woman. She was brave." Lily's voice strengthened. "She spent 5 years gathering evidence against people who could have killed her at any time. She did it because it was right. And now I'm here telling the truth because that's what she would have wanted." The courtroom was silent. Carver's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned Lily's memory, her ability to identify voices, her possible coaching. But Lily never wavered. She answered each question with calm certainty, never embellishing, never backing down. Finally, Carver played his last card. "Miss Mercer, isn't it true that you want revenge, that you're so angry about your parents' death that you'd say anything to hurt the people you blame?" "I'm not angry." Lily's voice was quiet. "I'm sad, and I'm tired. But mostly I'm determined that Mama and Papa didn't die for nothing. So this is about making their deaths meaningful. This is about truth." Lily looked at the jury. "My parents died trying to expose corruption. They gathered evidence, they followed the law, and they were murdered for it. If that doesn't matter, if powerful people can kill and face no consequences, then what's the point of having laws at all?" The question hung in the air. "No further questions," Carver said quietly. Lily was dismissed. As she passed the defense table, Lawrence Gaines leaned forward. "You're going to regret this, little girl." His voice was barely a whisper, but Lily heard it. She stopped, turned to face him. "No. You're going to regret what you did to my family." Then she walked away, head high, while the courtroom watched in stunned silence. The trial lasted 2 more days. Closing arguments were powerful on both sides, but the evidence was overwhelming. Documents, testimony, and most damning of all, a 9-year-old girl who had survived massacre and refused to be silenced. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. His voice was grave. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find the defendant, Lawrence Gaines, guilty. On the charge of bribery of federal officials, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the deaths of Joseph and Margaret Mercer, Robert and Martha Brennan. Michael Brennan and 2 unidentified travelers, guilty." The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison gavelled for order. Lawrence Gaines sat motionless, his empire crumbling around him. Sentencing came 2 days later. Judge Harrison was thorough. He reviewed each crime, each victim, the systematic corruption that had poisoned the territory for years. "Lawrence Gaines, you have been convicted of crimes that strike at the heart of civil society. You used your position to enrich yourself at the expense of honest citizens. You ordered the deaths of those who stood in your way. You corrupted the institutions meant to protect people from men exactly like you." Gaines stared straight ahead. "The law demands punishment. Society demands justice. The victims, living and dead, demand accountability." Harrison's voice hardened. "On the fraud and bribery charges, I sentence you to 20 years hard labor. On the conspiracy to murder charges, I sentence you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole." Gaines's face finally showed emotion. "Shock, then rage. You will spend the remainder of your days in federal prison contemplating the lives you destroyed and the trust you violated." Harrison looked at Lily in the gallery. "And perhaps you'll think about the 9-year-old girl who proved braver than you ever were." Marshals led Gaines away. He looked back once, his eyes finding Lily. The hatred in that gaze was palpable. Lily met it without flinching. Vivian was sentenced next. Her cooperation earned her consideration, but not mercy. "Vivian, Gaines, you participated in multiple murders. You led the attack that killed 6 people, including children. Your testimony against your husband shows you understand right from wrong. You simply chose wrong repeatedly." Vivian's face was stone. "I sentence you to death by hanging. Sentenced to be carried out in 60 days. For the first time, Vivian showed fear. Real human fear. "Your Honor," she started, "you had your chance for mercy when you gave Joseph Mercer and his family a chance to live. You chose execution. Now you face the same." Harrison's gavel fell. Court adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Caleb and Lily stood in afternoon sunshine. Constance had her arm around the girl. Sergeant Cooper and his men waited nearby, still providing security. "It's over," Lily said. She sounded uncertain, like she couldn't quite believe it. "The trial is over." Caleb knelt beside her. "Justice has been served. Your parents would be proud. What happens now?" "Now you get to be a kid again. Go to school, make friends, live life without looking over your shoulder." "And you?" Caleb hesitated. "I don't know. I haven't thought past today." "You could stay with me," Lily said, "if you wanted." The offer hung between them, weighted with possibility. Constance spoke up. "Isaiah has been asking about guardianship. He wants to be part of your life, Lily, as family. But not as my only family, Lily said. She looked at Caleb. Right, Caleb felt something shift in his chest. That old crack widening, letting light in. Right, if you'll have me. As what? As whatever you need. Guardian. Protector. He swallowed hard. Father, if you want. Lily's smile was small but genuine. The first real smile he had seen from her. I'd like that. Then it settled. Constance squeezed Lily's shoulder. You'll stay with me and Isaiah at the fort until Caleb finds a permanent home. We'll be family together. All of us. All of us. 6 months later, Caleb stood on the porch of a small ranch 20 miles outside Santa Fe. Not the Mercer Ranch. That land held too many ghosts. This was new ground, clean and full of possibility. The house was modest but sturdy. Corrals held horses Caleb was breaking to sell. A vegetable garden struggled against the high desert climate, but showed promise. It was honest work, simple work, the kind that let a man sleep at night. Lily appeared from the barn leading a young mare. She had grown in 6 months, filled out some loss that haunted hollowness. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at sudden noises, but she was healing. She's ready, Lily announced. I think we can sell her next week. You sure Caleb walked down to examine the horse? She's still a little skittish. She trusts me. That's enough. Caleb smiled. When did you become the horse expert? You taught me. Lily stroked the mare's neck. You said trust is built slowly. Same with horses as with people. Smart kid. I learned from the best. A wagon appeared on the road from Santa Fe. Isaiah and Constance Brennan making their weekly visit. They had become constants in Lily's life. Uncle and aunt indeed, if not yet in legal document. Isaiah carried a basket from Constance's kitchen. The woman was determined to fatten them both up through sheer force of baked goods. How's my favorite niece, Isaiah called. Your only niece, Lily corrected, but she was grinning. They gathered on the porch sharing food and stories and the comfortable silence of people who had fought together and survived. Lily showed Constance her latest drawings. Not the dark images of before, but landscapes and horses and the future she was building. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Caleb found himself thinking about Anna, his first daughter gone too soon. The grief was still there, probably always would be, but it no longer consumed him. Anna's death had taught him about loss. Lily had taught him about second chances. You're thinking about her, Lily said quietly. She had come to stand beside him. How did you know? You get this look, sad but peaceful. Is that okay, that I still think about her? Of course, Lily leaned against him. Just like I still think about Mama and Papa. We don't forget the people we lost, we just learn to carry them better. When did you get so wise? I had good teachers. They stood together as stars began to emerge. Behind them, Constance and Isaiah laughed at some shared joke. The horses nickered in the corral. The world continued turning indifferent to human pain, but also to human joy. Caleb Lily said, Yes, thank you. For finding me. For not leaving me. For choosing to stay. Thank you for trusting me. For being brave. For reminding me what matters. They watched the sunset in companionable silence. Two people who had lost everything and found each other in the wreckage. Not a replacement for what was gone, but something new. Something worth protecting. In Santa Fe, Lawrence Gaines sat in a federal prison cell. His empire destroyed his legacy, one of corruption and murder. He would die there, unmourned and forgotten. In Tucson, Vivian Gaines had hanged 2 months prior, her final words unrecorded and unmourned. The territory had moved on as it always did, burying its ugliness beneath new scandals and new hopes. But on a small ranch outside Santa Fe, a broken man and a traumatized girl built something the corrupt could never touch. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by courage, by the stubborn insistence that good could triumph, that justice could prevail, that love was stronger than hate. Lily Mercer would grow up safe, would go to school, make friends, learn to laugh freely. The nightmares would fade. The scars would remain, but they would become part of her story, not the entirety of it. And Caleb Rourke, who had failed one daughter and found redemption in protecting another, would spend the rest of his days making sure she knew she was loved, valued, safe. The girl in the dust had found her voice. The man who found her had found his purpose. And together they had proven that truth, however painful, was always worth fighting for. The desert wind carried away their words as father and daughter stood on the porch watching the day end and tomorrow begin. Behind them, family gathered. Ahead, a future uncertain but hopeful. And somewhere in the fading light, the ghosts of Margaret and Joseph Mercer looked on and smiled. Their daughter was safe. Their sacrifice had mattered. Justice had prevailed. And love in the end had won. The last witness had spoken her truth, and the world had listened.